I never thought dreams could feel so heavy. I remember sitting at the edge of my bed, the soft rustling of paper between my trembling fingers. The envelope was slightly crumpled from how tightly I had held it on the walk home from the mailbox. It bore the crimson seal of Stanford University, and inside was a future I had built one sleepless night at a time. I had been accepted. Stanford. Full admission. No scholarship, but a welcome letter that read like a promise: "We see you. We believe in you." I couldn't breathe. Not from panic. From disbelief. All those late nights tutoring at the diner counter while waiting tables, all the competitions, the extra AP credits, the volunteer hours, it had meant something. I held that letter like it was a lifeline. But lifelines, I would learn, don't always reach you in time. My house has always felt like two homes stitched together by obligation. On one end, my parents' praise, laughter, attention, all orbiting around my younger sister Ava like she was the sun itself. On the other, silence, expectations, and the unspoken agreement that I'd just figure things out. Ava was 2 years younger, louder, prettier by conventional standards, and, according to my mother, a natural. A natural at what, I never knew. She quit ballet, gave up on violin, dropped out of soccer after 2 practices. But she was bright. Not in the academic way, but in a way that made people notice her. Her presence filled a room. Mine. I was the shadow she cast. The day I got the letter, I didn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what they'd say. Later that evening, I placed the acceptance letter beneath my mattress. I felt ridiculous doing it, like some kind of smuggler hiding contraband. But I couldn't bear the idea of it being crumpled or dismissed. At dinner, my parents were gushing over Ava's latest Instagram post. 200 likes in 5 minutes, my dad said proudly. You really have an eye for those travel shots. Ava grinned, spinning her fork between her fingers. Wait till they see Florence. My mom chuckled. Oh honey, you're going to love it there. The campus is beautiful. Wait, Florence? I asked, blinking. As in Italy? Ava nodded. Yeah. Mom and Dad said I can do the summer art intensive there. It's, like, $12,000, but it'll look amazing on my portfolio. My fork paused midair. You're paying for it. Of course, my mom said, as if it were obvious. This kind of opportunity doesn't come twice. I stared at them. My mouth was dry. $12,000 for a summer. I hadn't even dared to ask for $5,000 to help with my college applications. I remember the time I needed $50 for the SAT late registration. My dad said, you should have planned better. Ava's laugh bounced around the table. Anyway, I need new luggage. Maybe something rose gold. That night, I stared at the ceiling until morning. I didn't cry. Not really. I felt like something inside me had closed. The next day, I skipped school and walked to the post office. I mailed back the housing deposit form. Not because I had the money, but because if I didn't, they'd assume I didn't care. 2 days later, Grandpa Walter called. Hey, Pumpkin, he said, his voice gravelly but warm. Graduation's coming, isn't it? Thought I'd come down and see my favorite granddaughter walk the stage. I smiled for the first time in days. You only have 2 granddaughters. Exactly. 50% chance of being right. Grandpa Walter had always been different. He was quiet but watchful, the kind of man who never missed a detail. A retired accountant, former Navy vet, and the only person who had ever looked me in the eyes and said, Emily, you're going to change this world. When he visited, he always brought a bag of chocolate-covered almonds and a folder of the New York Times crosswords we'd finished together. He wasn't affectionate in the hug-and-kiss way. But when I was 10 and scared to sleep alone, He bought a nightlight shaped like a lighthouse and said, "This doesn't just light up your room. It tells the dark where not to go." He always showed up when it mattered. The day of his visit, I vacuumed the whole downstairs and wiped the kitchen counters until they shined. My parents didn't ask me to. They were busy planning Ava's Florence trip, flights, hotels, a shopping day in Milan. When Grandpa walked through the door, his cane tapped rhythmically against the tile floor. His gray blazer was wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp behind his glasses. "Something smells like Windex and overachievement," he said, grinning. I hugged him, tight. That night, at dinner, he asked the question I had dreaded. "So, Emily," he said between bites of roast chicken, "where are you headed next fall?" The room fell quiet. Even Ava stopped scrolling. I looked down. "I got into Stanford." My mother blinked. "Emily." I didn't say anything because, well, it's too expensive. "I can't go." Grandpa's eyes narrowed. "Can't go?" I nodded. "They said they can't help. So I'm thinking maybe I'll take a gap year. Save up." There was a long pause. Grandpa's fork clinked softly as he set it down. "You got into Stanford," he repeated. "And they won't help you?" "Dad says it's not realistic," I whispered. "And that I should be independent." Ava groaned. "Not this again. Emily, not everything has to be about you." Walter ignored her. His gaze stayed locked on my parents. "What about the family trust?" he asked. My mom cleared her throat. "That's for emergencies. Stanford not urgent enough for you?" His voice was cool. Almost clinical. That tone I remembered from when he used to scold me for getting a math problem wrong on purpose to make classmates feel better. "We just want her to learn responsibility," Dad said. "I see," Grandpa said, leaning back. "And Florence is a responsible decision." My parents were silent. After dinner, Grandpa asked to see my acceptance letter. We sat together in the living room. I handed it over with shaking hands. He read it slowly, nodding occasionally, as if confirming something he already knew. "I always said you had it in you," he said quietly. I looked at him. "It doesn't matter. It's not happening." He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "We'll see about that." That night, I heard voices in the kitchen, muffled, tense. My parents, Grandpa. I couldn't make out the words. Only the mood, disbelief, then defensiveness, then something colder. When I walked downstairs the next morning, Grandpa was already dressed, a thick envelope tucked under his arm. He gave me a wink. "I've got some errands," he said. "Keep that Stanford letter handy." I nodded, confused. As he walked out the door, he turned and said something that stuck with me. "Numbers don't lie. But people. They do it without blinking." That was the morning everything began to change. I just didn't know it yet. It started with an absence. Grandpa didn't come home for lunch that day. Or for dinner. He left in the morning with a folder of documents and his usual quiet determination, and didn't return until well after dark. I heard his car in the driveway, the creak of the front door, the soft thud of his cane on the hardwood floor. I was waiting in the living room, curled up on the couch with my knees hugged to my chest. I didn't ask where he'd been. He didn't offer. He just handed me a receipt, folded 3 times. "What's this?" I asked. "Application fee reimbursement. Also covered the housing deposit," he said simply, as if we were discussing weather. I blinked. "How?" He settled into the armchair across from me with a groan. "Emily, I created that trust for your future. For you and Ava. Not for luxury vacations and designer handbags. I kept copies of the quarterly disbursement reports, Charles didn't expect me to check them now that I'm half blind and halfway to the grave. You're not even close, I whispered, voice shaking. He smiled faintly. Well, your father's financial ethics are. That night, I didn't sleep much. My heart beat with a strange mixture of hope and fear. Grandpa was up to something. I could feel it, but I had no idea what it would cost him. Or me. The next morning, everything exploded. It started at the breakfast table. Dad was unusually quiet, chewing his toast like it had personally offended him. Mom kept glancing at him, and Ava was obliviously scrolling through her phone, humming along to a tick-tock. Then Grandpa walked in, calm, precise, holding a manila envelope. I'd like to talk, he said, laying it down on the table. Mom's lips tightened. Dad. I'm not asking. The envelope opened with a soft whisper. Inside, copies of the trust documents, bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and a typed note at the top that read: reallocation of trust funds without beneficiary consent. What is this? Dad said, though his voice already trembled. A record, Grandpa said. Of how you diverted over 60% of Emily's educational fund to cover Ava's extracurriculars, international tuition prepayments, and, let me check, yes, a new BMW. That's ridiculous, Mom snapped. Ava's education is just as important. Ava's 17. Emily's leaving for college in 2 months, Grandpa said flatly. Or she would be, if she had any support. Silence. And then Ava, wait, you were saving for Emily too? Grandpa turned to her, eyes softened just a fraction. Yes, Ava. The trust was equal. I wanted both of you to have options, not just one. Ava looked stunned, as if this was the first time she realized money didn't fall from the sky. The argument that followed was brutal. My father shouted. My mother cried. Ava left the room entirely. I sat still. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible, I was central. Not because I asked to be. But because someone had finally seen the truth, and spoken it out loud. You've always made Emily earn everything, Grandpa said, voice rising slightly. And you've made Ava believe everything is owed to her. That's not parenting. That's favoritism dressed up in excuses. She's not even creative, my mother hissed, her voice sharp and bitter. Emily just studies. She doesn't express herself like Ava does. I froze. The air left my lungs. And that's when I realized, it wasn't just about money. It was about value. To them, my grades were just facts. Ava's selfies were art. That afternoon, Grandpa asked me to take a walk with him. We strolled down the quiet suburban streets, the sun beginning to dip behind the rooftops. I need you to listen carefully, he said, adjusting his glasses. I'm initiating a revision of the trust. Effective immediately. I frowned. Is that legal? I'm the executor. It's very legal, he said. And long overdue. But what about Mom and Dad? They'll be furious. He paused, his voice lowering. Emily, sometimes doing the right thing means being okay with making people uncomfortable. You've spent your whole life trying not to ruffle feathers. But fairness isn't quiet, it's firm. I swallowed hard. They won't forgive me. Good, he said. Because you didn't ask for this burden. They put it on you. We sat on a bench near the park where Ava used to swing while I sat on the sidelines with textbooks. I'm not doing this out of pity, he added. I'm doing this because you've earned it. Because I'd rather invest in someone who fights, who learns, who doesn't fold under pressure. I didn't realize I was crying until he passed me a tissue. Later that night, I overheard them yelling. You can't cut us off, my mother screamed. That money is still part of this family. You stopped being a family the moment you gambled with one child's future to bankroll the other's vacation, Grandpa shot back. You can't just erase us, my dad yelled. I'm not erasing you, Grandpa replied coldly. You did that yourself. And then, the door slammed. The next morning, things were quiet. Too quiet. Mom didn't come down for breakfast. Dad left early. Ava stayed in her room. Grandpa made pancakes. From scratch. He even smiled when I put extra syrup on mine, which he used to lecture me about. Then he handed me a small white envelope. Inside, a check. With a memo line that read, "For what they couldn't see in you." Tears burned the back of my throat. I can't accept this, I whispered. Yes, you can, he said, gently. And you will. But it's justice, Emily. Not charity. That afternoon, he drove me to the post office himself. We mailed the final paperwork. Tuition confirmation. Enrollment forms. Dorm acceptance. All of it. And with every stamp, with every form slid into the outgoing bin, I felt something lift. It wasn't just hope. It was validation. But when we got back home, Ava was waiting at the door. I didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I replied. She looked down. Do you hate me? I shook my head. You didn't choose this. They did. But you still resent me. I did, I admitted. But I'm tired of carrying that weight. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Are you really going to Stanford? Yes. She paused. I think you're brave. For a second, the rivalry dropped. And I saw her, just a girl, confused, raised to believe she was the center of gravity. Maybe we were both victims of the same story. Just different roles. But one of us had found a way out. That night, Grandpa tucked a letter into his suitcase. I asked him what it was. My final instructions, he said. In case I go before they learn. Learn what? That fairness isn't about who's louder. It's about who's been silenced longest. There's a kind of silence that creeps into a house after a storm, not the peace of resolution, but the vacuum left by unspoken truths that no one dares clean up. For the next few days, my parents walked on eggshells around Grandpa. Ava barely left her room. And I, for once, wasn't trying to fix the cracks. I let them splinter. Because something inside me had shifted. I was no longer just surviving the uneven love in that house, I was watching it unravel. And oddly, I didn't feel guilty. I felt seen. Finally. It wasn't long before the legal work began. I remember Grandpa sitting at the kitchen table, papers fanned out like battle plans. He had reading glasses perched on his nose, a black fountain pen in his hand, and a calculator from the 1980s by his elbow. He looked like a general preparing for a war no one else even knew had started. Did you know, he began, not looking up, that in the past 2 years, your parents withdrew over $48,000 from the trust under the category Educational Enrichment? I blinked. What does that even mean? He finally met my gaze. It means they hid personal purchases, luggage, plane tickets, luxury tutors, under the guise of school expenses. They signed off on the reports themselves. But guess who still holds power of review? You, I whispered. He nodded. And I just exercised it. The next week was a whirlwind. Grandpa visited his lawyer, Mr. Danvers, a white-haired man with a surprisingly sharp wit and a passion for exact phrasing. I sat in on one of the meetings, mostly quiet, absorbing everything. Mr. Walter, Danvers said, tapping a document, with your position as founding trustee and Clause 8B under misuse of funds, you have full legal standing to not only revoke access but also reallocate. Good, Grandpa said. I want full reallocation to Emily. Retroactive. Danvers whistled. That'll burn bridges. They lit the match when they chose one daughter over the other. When we returned home, I could feel the tension the second we opened the door. Dad stood in the foyer, arms crossed. Where have you been? With Danvers, Grandpa replied coolly. You're really going through with this? Already did. Mom came in from the kitchen, face flushed. Dad, please. We didn't mean to hurt Emily. We thought Ava needed the boost more. Needed, Grandpa repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. You needed her to shine more, or you wanted her to. Because what I see is a girl who was given everything, while the other had to beg just to dream. Dad stepped forward. This is our family, not a courtroom. Exactly, Grandpa said. So maybe you should have treated it like something worth protecting. Then he turned to me. Go pack a weekend bag. You're staying with me for a bit. I moved in with Grandpa that night. His apartment wasn't big, just a 2-bedroom in a quiet retirement community, but it felt like sanctuary. He gave me the master room. Said he preferred the smaller one anyway, less space for regrets to echo. I asked if he missed them. My parents. He paused before answering. I miss who they were. Before pride became their compass. That weekend, I saw a version of myself I'd never had the chance to meet. I slept in past 6. I laughed at old war movies with Grandpa. I applied for Stanford's housing grant on a real computer, not my outdated phone. I cried once, in the middle of dinner, when he passed me a plate and said, no one should have to fight this hard to be treated fairly. Then, one afternoon, he brought out a box from his closet. These, he said, pulling out stacks of manila folders, are your records. My what? Everything I've kept on you, grades, awards, letters you wrote me as a kid. You've always been exceptional, Emily. Don't let them make you feel like a footnote. I didn't know whether to laugh or sob. So I did both. Meanwhile, back at my old house, the fallout was growing. Ava texted me. Mom's freaking out. She says Grandpa's punishing us. I didn't respond. Then another. They're saying we might have to cancel Florence. That one stung less than I expected. And finally. Are you happy now? I sat with that for a while. Let the guilt rise. Let it settle. And then I deleted the messages. The next week, my parents showed up at Grandpa's place uninvited. They knocked, loud and desperate. Grandpa opened the door halfway. We need to talk, Dad said, his voice sharp with desperation. Grandpa didn't flinch. About the consequences of your choices. Sure. Step inside. They sat on the couch like scolded children. I stayed in the hallway, listening. We made a mistake, Mom said. Okay. We admit it. It's more than a mistake, Grandpa replied. It was favoritism. Financial abuse. And it almost cost Emily her future. We're her parents. Dad shouted. We have the right to decide. No, you had the responsibility to support. You forfeited the right when you made her feel less than. There was a pause. Then Mom, quieter, so what now? You've cut us out. Grandpa took a breath. No. I've cut you off. There's a difference. You're still family. But family doesn't mean blind access. It means earned trust. And you've got a deficit there. When they left, Grandpa handed me a folder. Inside, the revised trust documents. I was now the sole active beneficiary. A clause included Ava's future access, conditioned on completing college on her own merit. She deserves a shot too, he said. But not without skin in the game. I looked up at him, tears rising again. You didn't have to do any of this. He smiled. You're wrong, Emily. I did. Because if I didn't, I'd be no better than them. Later that night, I found a photo tucked inside the folder. Me, age 9, holding a chess trophy. Grandpa kneeling beside me. A note on the back. She doesn't just win, she learns. And that's the better prize. I pressed it to my chest and whispered, "Thank you." For the first time in years, I believed I was worthy. Not because someone told me, but because someone fought for me. It's strange how quickly the human heart can adjust to a new reality. One week, I was quietly erasing my dreams with a broken pencil. The next, I was ordering twin XL bed sheets for a Stanford dorm. It didn't feel real. Not yet. But the freedom, that was real. So was the silence from my parents. No phone calls. No apologies. Only Ava sent messages now and then. Sometimes apologetic. Sometimes confused. Never cruel, but never quite ready to own anything either. I didn't blame her. She'd been raised in a house where love was conditional, but praise, that was on tap, for the child who entertained. Grandpa said we should celebrate. Not for Stanford, but for finally being able to breathe. He took me out for steak. The waitress complimented my dress. Big day, she asked. Grandpa answered for me. My granddaughter just reclaimed her future. She smiled politely, not understanding the weight of his words. But I did. I felt it. I cut into my steak like I was slicing through the years I spent shrinking myself so others could feel taller. A week later, a certified letter arrived. It was from my parents' lawyer. A polite, formal inquiry. Would Mr. Walter be willing to reconsider the reallocation of the trust funds in the interest of family harmony? I remember Grandpa reading it, then folding it neatly into thirds. Do you want to respond? I asked. He handed me the envelope and said, "Why don't you?" My throat went dry. Me? He nodded. This is your story now. I sat at his kitchen table that night and wrote. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Harper. Thank you for your interest in my future. Unfortunately, your timing comes a little late. I've spent years earning what was mine. Now, I intend to live it. I don't want revenge. I want distance. And dignity. I hope you find peace with the choices you made. I already have. Respectfully. Emily Harper. I sealed it. Stamped it. Mailed it the next morning. I never heard back. Meanwhile, Grandpa arranged the final wire transfer. My tuition, paid in full. Housing, covered. Books, supplies, laptop, all accounted for. He left a portion in a separate account under my name. With great freedom, he said, comes great budgeting. He made spreadsheets. Color-coded. Even created a mock, monthly budget quiz like it was a school assignment. And I loved him for it. As August approached, the reality started to sink in. I was leaving. Really leaving. My childhood room, still covered in old debate team medals and fraying book spines, started to feel like a museum to someone else's life. On my last night at Grandpa's, I couldn't sleep. I found him on the balcony, sipping tea in the dark. You okay? I asked. I will be, he said. Once I see you walk through that gate. You already did more than I ever expected. He looked over at me, eyes soft. I didn't do enough. Not until it almost slipped away. We sat in silence for a while, listening to cicadas scream like summer was refusing to let go. Moving day at Stanford felt like a movie. Students carrying boxes. Parents crying. RAs shouting directions. 100 different beginnings happening all at once. Grandpa carried my suitcase all the way to the elevator before finally letting go. "I'm not crying," he said, sniffling. "Good," I smiled. "Because I am." He hugged me, tight, for once. Then he said something I'll never forget. "They planted their pride like roots. You grew in spite of them. That's not just resilience, Emily. That's power." I watched him leave. And when the elevator doors closed, I stood in my dorm hallway for a long moment. Breathing. Existing. Beginning. 1 week into classes, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a worn photo of Ava and me as kids, holding hands on a beach. Taped to the back was a note in Ava's handwriting. "You deserved better. I see that now. I'm sorry." I didn't cry. But I placed the photo on my desk, next to my syllabus and campus map. Because forgiveness doesn't have to mean forgetting. Sometimes, it just means letting go of the weight you were never meant to carry. Meanwhile, back home, things were shifting. I heard from mutual friends that Ava's Florence trip had been cancelled. The new car was returned to the dealership. My father had quietly taken out a loan. My mother picked up a part-time job at a boutique she used to shop at. Poetic, in a way. They weren't ruined. Just, confronted. By the reality they'd constructed. And by the daughter who no longer lived in their shadow. The world didn't change when I left home. But I did. I stopped apologizing for existing too brightly. Stopped minimizing my voice to protect someone else's comfort. I learned that family isn't who shares your name. It's who shows up when the lights are off and your hands are empty. And for me, that was Grandpa. On the last page of my economics notebook, I wrote, "Fairness isn't about everyone getting the same. It's about everyone getting what they need." And what I needed was someone to believe I mattered. 4 years. That's how long it took to rebuild everything they tried to bury. 4 years of new faces, endless reading, freezing dorm nights, moments of absolute doubt, and then the quiet reassurance that I wasn't alone anymore. That I never truly was. Grandpa called every Sunday at 10 a.m. sharp. If I missed a call, I'd get a voicemail. "Pumpkin, just checking to see if Stanford hasn't swallowed you whole." He sent crossword puzzles in the mail with post-it notes. Down, 6 letters. Clue, the person I'm proudest of. Every finals week, I'd get a care package. Sometimes tea. Sometimes a new calculator. Once, a single sock with a note. "If you're confused, maybe it's time to do laundry." He never stopped reminding me, through humor, quiet gestures, and spreadsheets, that I mattered. Graduation came on a warm spring day. I wore the cap and gown, heart pounding like it knew what this moment meant. I scanned the crowd of parents and families, unsure if I'd see him. And then, there he was. Sitting right near the front, holding a giant sign made from a cardboard Amazon box that read in marker, "This is what legacy looks like." I laughed and cried at the same time. I didn't see my parents. Not that I expected to. Ava sent me a simple message that morning. "You earned every step. I'm proud of you." I replied. "So did you, for seeing it." After the ceremony, Grandpa hugged me like it was the first time and last time all at once. "You did it, Emily," he whispered. "No," I said, gripping his jacket. "We did." That evening, we went back to his place. Just the two of us. He made spaghetti, poured grape juice into wine glasses, and insisted we toast. "To freedom," he said. "To finally being seen," I replied. He smiled, his eyes damp. "It's about time the world caught up to what I knew all along." That summer, I got a job offer from a nonprofit focused on educational equity. I accepted immediately. Not because it paid well, it didn't, but because I understood what it felt like to be overlooked, underestimated, unchosen. If I could be that voice for someone else, it was worth everything. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in Grandpa's attic, I found something unexpected. A sealed letter. Dated a week before I left for college. It was addressed to me. I opened it, hands shaking. Dear Emily. If you're reading this, you're already on your way. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you're unsure if you belong. But let me say this, the world is full of people who will ask you to shrink, to apologize, to explain why you're extraordinary. Don't. Live loudly. Learn relentlessly. Love without hesitation. And when it's your turn to lift someone up, do it without asking why they were on the floor to begin with. You are not just my granddaughter. You are my hope for a better world. Go show them who you are. Walter. I cried for a long time. Not because I was sad. Because I finally believed it. A few months later, I visited my childhood home. Not to see them, but to see the place where it all began. It looked smaller. Duller. As if time had peeled away the illusions. My parents were no longer the giants of my childhood. They were people, flawed, limited, and still unable to fully meet my gaze. My mother tried to smile. My father avoided eye contact. They asked questions. I answered politely. There was no anger left in me, only distance. And that was enough. Before I left, Ava caught me at the porch. Thank you, she said. For what? For not becoming them. I didn't answer. Just hugged her gently. Back in my own apartment, I hung Grandpa's photo above my desk. Beneath it, I framed the note he wrote in college. She doesn't just win, she learns. And that's the better prize. Years passed. I wrote books. Taught students. Sat on panels about equity in education. And every time someone asked me where it all started, I said. With a man who used numbers to tell the truth. And a girl who finally stopped shrinking.